All right, hi everybody. It's 12 o'clock Pacific, so I'm gonna get started. Um, Please let me know, can you hear me? Can a couple of you type yes if you can hear me in the chat? Awesome. All right, great. Thank you so much. All right, so welcome. Thank you for participating today. So the purpose of this workshop is to, one, provide you with some updates on the virtual career fair, and then two, to discuss some best practices around your resume, and then an elevator pitch, which is a way to present yourself to companies so that you feel prepared for when you attend the virtual career fair and are meeting with companies. Before we get started, we're going to keep everyone's microphones on mute just because there are a lot of participants and we want to minimize any background noise. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box at any time. I'm going to be checking the chat box every 3 to 4 minutes to see if there are questions about the material that I'm presenting, and then I'm happy to answer those questions throughout the course of the presentation. This will be recorded, so if you want to watch this workshop again, before the virtual career fair, just as a refresher, you can do so. We'll post a link to it in the Slack channel. And then also we will be sharing the slide deck. So I shared it already last night for the students that were participating in the Friday night session. So the link is already there. I think some of you have been looking at it already, but I will post it again just so that it's easier to find. Okay, so who am I? So my name is Morgan. If any of you have taken CodePath courses in the past, you may have interacted with me. I am a career services manager with CodePath. So I work with tech companies to provide hiring opportunities for our students through opportunities like this virtual career fair. And then I also host workshops like these on resumes, on LinkedIn profiles, on technical interviewing tips, etc. And then I'm also working to build a CodePath Career Center, which in the future will be a place where students can go to receive, career assistance, job search assistance, resume help, etc. from CodePath. So that's a little bit about me. I don't think I have met most of you, so nice to virtually meet all of you. Okay, so in this workshop, what we're going to be talking about. So one, at the end, you will have the resources and guidance to create a targeted resume that you can use to submit for the virtual career fair. That will be the resume that companies see, either if they are matched to you for opportunities or in the resume book of all the students who were in technical interview prep this summer. You'll learn how to construct an effective elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is basically usually a short summary of yourself, your professional accomplishments, your career goals, and why you want to work for that company. I'm going to teach you how to create those for yourself so that when you are talking to each company that you meet at the virtual career fair, you're able to introduce yourself in a professional manner. And then we're going to talk about how to evaluate company values, which basically just means, how to do research on a company and determine if it's a good fit for you. When we announce next week the companies that will be participating in the virtual career fair, we're going to ask you to rank your choices. And obviously, to be able to rank your choices, you're going to need to understand how to determine if a company is a good fit for you. And then finally, hopefully you feel prepared for the virtual career fair and excited for that opportunity happening in September. Okay, so I'm going to start with just talking about the next steps leading up to the virtual career fair. So if you don't know, it is happening on Friday, September 13th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time. So that's 12 to 4 p.m. Central time and 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. And so the steps leading up to that is that next week, we will be announcing the list of companies that will be participating in the virtual career fair and the job openings that they have available, either internships or full-time opportunities. Many companies have both. So next week we will be announcing the companies participating. Then once they are announced, we invite the students to rank their choices. So basically we'll send out a survey with all of the companies. You can rank your preferences of the companies that are available. And then also that is where you will submit your resume, which is the resume that we will provide to companies that you have been matched with. So once all that happens, students and companies will receive their matches for the virtual career fair on Wednesday, August 28th. And then once you have your matches, then we open up the link to scheduling. So scheduling at the virtual career fair, you get to meet with each company that you are matched with for 10 minutes each. And so we open up a link to scheduling so that you can pick your 10-minute time slot. Don't feel like this is going to be an interview. It's a career fair. So just like at a career fair, you meet with a couple of companies, you chat with them about your interests for a couple of minutes each. And then the students that they are interested in continuing in their hiring process, they will reach out to you to follow up for either a phone interview or a technical interview. You know, depending on what their interview process is, it varies by company. So don't feel like, you know, oh my God, this is 10 minutes. I have to prove that I am, you know, a software engineering genius in a little amount of time. These are just introductions, just like you would have at an in-person career fair. So we open up the scheduling from August 28th to September 6th. Scheduling is first come, first serve. So if, you know, September 13th is a busy day for you, it's definitely in your best interest to schedule as soon as the schedule's open so that you can get a slot that works best for your schedule. And then finally, as I already mentioned, during the fair, you meet with your company matches for about 10 minutes each. Later on in this presentation, I'll talk about elevator pitches, which is how you can make the most of that time and introduce yourself really succinctly. And then also when we're talking about company values, we'll talk about, you know, how to prepare questions ahead of time so that when you are speaking to that recruiter or engineering manager for those 10 minutes, you can really get a good sense of if this is an opportunity, you know, or a company that you would really like to work for. Okay, so I'm going to pause for questions. So Anish said, how many companies does each person get matched with? That's a great company. So we don't have a maximum limit, but the minimum that we want to give to each student is 4 company matches. So at minimum, you will meet with 4 companies on September 13th. Are there other questions about the virtual career fair itself? Okay. Cherie said, when meeting companies, do we meet them all on the same day? Yes. So the virtual career fair, like I mentioned, is a 4-hour event. It takes place from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time. So all of the interviews will happen within that 4-hour window. And then Salvador asked, so that means we won't be able to meet all of the companies? Yes, that is what it means. So the reason that companies like CodePath's virtual career fair is because we match them to students that meet the requirements that they have, and then also the students give their requirements. So earlier this summer, it was in July, I believe, we sent out that survey where we were asking, are you looking for internships? Are you looking for full-time? What geographic locations are you open to, et cetera, et cetera. So we use those questions and then the ranking that we'll do next week, and then also the company's hiring requirements to determine which students from the technical interview course would be a good fit for those companies. And that's why, you know, this career fair appeals to companies, because they don't have to do the work of sourcing for the students that would be a good fit. We just say, here are the students based on your requirements and their requirements that would be a good fit for this opportunity. So no, you do not meet with every company that is participating. You meet with the companies that you are matched with. I'm going to give another minute for questions about the virtual career fair, and then we're going to move on to talking about resumes. All right, so we got, how do you decide the matching? So that's a great question. So like I just mentioned, students and companies provide their requirements for internships or full-time opportunities and technical roles. And based on those requirements, we match the companies and the students. So on the student end, right, we asked you, are you looking for internships full-time? We asked you what programming languages you're comfortable with using in a professional setting. We asked you about your geographic requirements, et cetera. And we asked similar questions to companies. Companies have, you know, maybe they're in Boston, and so they're only open to students that are willing to relocate to Boston for the summer or for full-time, right? That makes sense. They might be looking for people with certain programming skills. They might have preferences about if you've had a prior internship or not, et cetera, right? So both students and companies provide us with their requirements, and then we match you based on those requirements. Okay, a bunch of questions just came in. Let's see. What day is the virtual career fair? Friday, September 13th. And this is also, so we also sent out that email earlier this summer with all of this information. So I would search your inbox for virtual career fair, and I would also, it's also posted on the discussion system. So the date, the time, that's all already available to you. What factors of our performance in the class are considered in the matching? Great question. So we use the total of your HackerRank scores. So not just one HackerRank, but the total of the scores over the summer. And that's only a part of your matching. So like I said, there are also the other things, what languages you know, what locations you're open to working in the US, you know, like what type of role you're looking for. So yeah, so your HackerRank scores are used, but it's only a portion of the matching. So don't feel like, oh, I did really poorly on week 7's HackerRank, I'm not gonna get any good companies. That is not the case. Okay, how many companies are attending? I don't have the exact number. I think it's about 30 companies. Will we be told beforehand which companies are open to visa sponsorship? Yes, so when we announce the list of companies next week, we also, with that announcement, will have the jobs that they have open, internships or co-ops or full-time, and we will also have their requirements. So requirements will probably be things like they should know Java, or they should know Python, or, you know, they need to be open to living in Boston, or, you know, we are open to sponsorship or we are not, you know, et cetera, et cetera. All that information will be provided when the list of companies is released. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see, what time is, okay, that one was answered in the chat. Thanks, Cherie. Do our performance and HackerRanks already answered that one? 4 hours, we should pitch the, okay, so Monica, as you can see in the slide, you meet with each of your company matches for 10 minutes each, but the fair is 4 hours long. So even though maybe you know, will only meet with 4 companies, the companies are meeting with students from technical interview prep across those 4 hours. What will the interview be like? So it's only 10 minutes. So it's a career fair. So treat this like a career fair, right? When you go to a career fair, you're not given a whiteboarding question, right? While there are a line of people behind you. So it's the same thing. You know, will introduce yourself. You'll talk about your, you know, your professional interests or your accomplishments, your career goals, why you want to work for that company, right? And then they will probably also ask you questions. You know, just consider it, you know, if you've ever done a phone screen for an interview, it will probably be a shorter version of a phone screen. So treat this just like you would treat an in-person career fair. It will be a similar experience. It's just online instead of in person. Okay, I will, so Cherie asked, can we update our requirements survey answers? Yes, I will post again the link to the survey on SurveyMonkey, so that if you want to fill it out again, if you feel like your requirements have changed in the past month, then you can do so. Beth asked, will all companies see our resume in a resume book? That's a great question. So no, some companies have purchased just a ticket to meet the students at the fair. And then some companies have purchased a ticket to the fair and a ticket, and not a ticket, and the entire resume book. So some companies get both, some companies just get one. And then how will you know which roles we are interested in? So Brooke, when we announce the companies and we announce the roles that they have, then we also provide that survey where students can rank their choices. And so, after you're able to see what opportunities they have available, you should use that when you're making your ranking decisions. All right, how are we doing on time? Okay, I'm gonna move on to resumes since we're already 15 minutes into the session, but please continue to post questions and I will answer them as soon as I can. All right, so resumes. So I'm sure all you know basically what a resume is, but resumes include your education and academic achievements, your extracurricular activities and leadership positions inside and outside of university or college, your paid and unpaid work experience, and then your work-related skills, which in this context is most commonly the programming languages and databases, et cetera, that you know. So here, in this slide, so again, I'm going to share this slide deck and it is also already in Slack. So you have access to all of these examples of resumes and other resources. So this was a student who took, I believe one of our Android course, no, I think they took our mobile app design course last fall and I really loved their resume. So the things I love about it, it's very clean, it's very professional looking, right? So the formatting is very neat and simple and straightforward. And I really like that they had the sections very neatly organized. So at the top, they have their education, they have their GPA. GPA is good to have if you have a GPA above a 3.0. I would say if you don't have you have a lower than a 3.0, then you can take it off your resume. And I think that's a good rule of thumb because, as companies are evolving their hiring practices, they're starting to care less about GPAs and more about evidence of your technical acumen. So, you might have a 2.8, but you developed a killer iOS app. That's going to be way more important than, the fact that, you really sucked at physics or whatever, right? So that's my general rule of thumb for GPA. Leave it in if it's strong, take it out if it's not so strong. And then if a company asks about it later on in the interview process, you can tell them then. So I like that he had his relevant coursework right here at the top. This is really helpful, especially if you don't have any work experience yet or internship experience, then you can at least show employers, here is what I've been learning in school about computer science. And then I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. As far as high school, I would recommend taking high school off. If you had a really strong maybe experience in high school that you want to share and you feel like it's important and it shows, something about your professionalism or your ability as a software engineer, et cetera, then you can leave high school in. But otherwise, I would say that most companies don't really care about what you did when you were 16. I know that might sound blunt, but high school is typically, as you get older, it's long and longer in the past. And so it's not really a relevant representation of who you are as a professional now in the present. So I would say if there's something really important from high school, you can leave it in. But if it's not that important and it's just, I was really smart in high school, I would say you could take it out and instead try to include more things that you've done in college or outside of the classroom that demonstrates your skills and your fit for an opportunity. The next thing that I really liked, so really organized. So as you can see, this person doesn't actually have any paid work experience, but they still have a ton of relevant experience that if I was a technical recruiter, I would be really excited about interviewing this candidate. So they have school projects, that they've done at Duke, and then they have, some like hackathon projects that they've done, and they won an award, best use of Microsoft Stack. So even though this person has never had an internship, they still look really impressive in their resume. And so that's what I'm trying to get across is that, a lot of students are really worried about how do I demonstrate that I'm good for an opportunity when I haven't been given an opportunity yet, right? And so really the answer there is utilizing resources through your university or your computer science classes, or if you're, the program that you're at isn't that strong, then make opportunities for yourself. Build your own personal website, you know, try to build an app or like a little game or something, you know, and then these are things you can add to your resume that demonstrate your abilities without it being an internship. And then the last thing I really liked was their leadership experience at the bottom. So it shows that they aren't just a like passive participant at their university. It shows that they really are a leader, that they like to, you know, initiate things, initiate change, you know, create events or opportunities. And so that really demonstrates your ambitiousness to employers, and they really like to see that you're really active outside of just your schoolwork, which I know is a big ask. I also, when I was in university, I had 2 jobs. I was the leader of 3 student groups, and I had like a full course load, and it's a lot. And I, you know, I completely empathize that sometimes you feel like, oh my God, they want so much from me. But I will say that it does help you, especially in such a competitive field as the tech industry, to be able to demonstrate, you know, all the areas that you are active in inside and outside of the classroom. So that's why I really love that resume, and that resume is available in the slide deck. Okay, I saw some questions. I'm gonna pause. Let's see. Okay, so Sophia asked if I could send the example resume and the slideshow, to the pilot class. Oh, okay, I will get that to Daphne so that she can post it to you. I don't think I'm in that Slack channel. Thanks for pointing that out, Sophia. All right, is the threshold 3.0 or 3.5? I would typically say it's 3.0. What kind of things can we do to make up for not having an internship? So I hope I answered that question, Alexia, with, you know, the side projects, personal projects, school activities. Let me know if that didn't answer your question. All right, next question. I heard from my mentor that if you got an internship before, you should put the experience first and then the language and education in the last. Yeah, so that's, you know, I think the tough things with resumes is that it can be very subjective. And, you know, you might meet people who are very particular about how it's formatted. But these are, you know, these are more so general guidelines than hard and fast rules. It's really hard to say your resume has to absolutely be this one way. I don't think that's true. I think that these are guidelines or best practices for how to format your resume. But to address your question, I think that's fine. So you put your internship in the work experience section, and then you can put the languages and the education that you have. I think you're saying at the bottom of your resume. You know, if that's how you want to format it, I think that's also okay. You know, I think typically people have education at the top, but I don't think someone is not going to hire you because your education was at the bottom of your resume instead of the top. So don't worry too much about that. Okay, Guillermo posting about classes. Thanks, Guillermo. He's an awesome tech fellow, by the way. Okay, could we get a couple of resume examples, templates to work on ours? Yes, so there are a bunch of different resume examples linked in this slide deck, and you can totally go through them and look at them in your own time and kind of use them as inspiration for creating your own resume. Which section should we put CodePath on our resume? So I would say in the education section. We are an education nonprofit, and we provide courses that are offered at universities and online. So it is considered educational material. So you could put that in your education section along with your university and high school. So Sristi asked if we can assume they already have our resumes. No, companies do not have your resumes yet because you have not yet submitted them. You will submit them when you rank your preferences for the virtual career fair. And then Cherie also is asking about the resume book. Okay, so again, some companies that are participating in the virtual career fair are also purchased a resume book, which will be the resumes of all of the students that participated. And so when you submit your resume, you know, later next week, those are the resumes that will be in the resume book that some companies will be able to access. Okay. So organizing your resume. So, and I'm going to touch on this briefly because I think that, you know, since most of you are still early in your careers, it may not be as relevant, but this is good to know as you start to gain more work experience. So typically, as a professional, you're going to have multiple versions of your resume. So you're going to have one that is a master resume. And that all of your skills, all of your accomplishments, all of your work and non-paid experiences, etc. And this is kind of where you keep everything, right? But because typically in the job search or hiring process, companies don't spend, 10 minutes reading every line of your resume. You don't want to give them your master resume because that's too much information. You want to give them a targeted version of your resume. And what a targeted version is that it's a resume that only has the work, the projects, the skills, etc., that is relevant to that position. So, an example might be, let me think of a good example. So if you are applying to a iOS engineering position and, on your master resume, you have like a ton of projects, pretend you're that person from the last slide. You have all these projects, all this leadership experience. You want to take out the things that are not related to iOS development, right? So that when the person hiring for that role sees your resume, they see, wow, that person, had an internship last summer where they were coding in iOS, and then they've also made two iOS apps, for school or in their free time. Like, this is a candidate I need to talk to, right? So you make it really easy for them to find the information that's relevant to the position by having a targeted resume. For this scenario where it's the virtual career fair, you're submitting one resume that multiple companies will see. I think that you don't have to worry too much about hyper targeting. You more so just want to make sure that your resume demonstrates your technical skills. So something that I see a lot with student resumes is that they have a lot of non-technical work on their resume, maybe from like high school or, other things. So it's like, oh, I worked at Chipotle, or I was a babysitter, I was a lifeguard, I was a dog walker. Like, those things are all interesting, but they're not relevant to the position. So I usually say to those people, instead of focusing so much on your paid work experience that was non-technical, instead focus on projects you've done in school, side projects you've done on your own. Maybe you took a Udacity course on Python. Maybe you took a CodePath course on Python or Java, right? Focus on those things instead on the resume, instead of the experiences that aren't as relevant to a general software engineering internship, right? Okay, I'm gonna check the chat. Yes, okay. So next week when we announce the companies that are participating, we invite you to rank your choices, and in that survey, we also ask for your resume. And then, so when we do the matching process and we provide the companies with your resume, that's the resume that we will be giving to them. Does CodePath have a course on Python or Java? Sorry, no, I meant like, technical interview prep, you could take it in Java or Python, sorry. When is the survey due? It is, I'll check on that. I'm pretty sure we need it by, I think, the 24th, which is the last day of the class. So I think next week we are planning to provide time for people to complete the ranking survey during the class. So I think we'll all be doing it together at one time, or between the 20th and the 24th, excuse me. Okay. So another big question that people usually have about resumes is how to describe yourself, how to talk about the work that you've done or the experiences that you've had in your resume and make it sound really impressive. So here are some general tips. So start every sentence with a strong active verb. So, that might be created, established, deployed, implemented, built, etc. And then here I have a link to a document that I put together called active verb examples. And so this gives different scenarios that you might be trying to describe in your resume, and it gives you some ideas about how to describe it. So we'll just look at the first one. So describing achievements, right? So this point should be talking about an experience where you made a positive impact, usually probably on a project or in a team or, you know, on an assignment, etc. So when you're describing achievements, some common really strong verbs you can use are like achieved, exceeded, increased, launched, reached, succeeded, right? And then I gave a couple of examples. So reached goal of creating a new automated response feature within a 3-week deadline. So, you know, using strong active verbs to describe achievements. And then I also have other sections in here where, you know, you can describe when you led a project, you can describe your problem solving abilities, describe when you created something new, your communication skills, right? So this document is in the slide deck and available for you so that when you're writing about your experiences, you feel like you have some good examples of how you should be talking about things. Okay. So in addition to strong active verbs, you also want to try to quantify your experience. So you're trying to demonstrate the size or the scope, you know, the impact of your work. So if you know, had an internship this summer where you helped work on a feature that was going to be affecting 100,000 users, right? You want to put that number in there so that employers or recruiters, when they're looking at your resume, they can see the impact of your work, the importance of your work, right? Or maybe even there was an example from a student yesterday who just made a VBA script during their internship that just, I think it increased the efficiency of some like workflow processes within the office. You know, even though that might not be, you know, huge global change, those types of, you know, efficiency or productivity changes are really important to companies. They make companies run faster. They help them make more money, right? So if companies see it's like, oh wow, they're really good at like writing scripts or building software that really helps with company efficiency, that's interesting to me, right? So you're just trying to quantify the work that you've done to demonstrate the impact that it had. You know, and then sometimes when you're an intern or you're just starting out, you don't really get a lot of insight into the business impact of the work you're doing. So I would say that if you really, really don't know a way to quantify something, then don't worry about it. You know, don't stress yourself out about it. You will, you know, if you still have the other elements of a good resume, it will not be the end of the world. But I will say that if you can quantify things, it will help your resume stand out more because it really shows that you understood not only the work that you did, but the impact that it had on the business or the customer, etc. Okay, don't see any questions. Thanks, Guillermo, for answering so many questions for me. All right. And so then on this slide, so I'm just going a little bit more in depth again with the bullet points. So here we have a couple of examples of how you can take an okay bullet point and make it excellent. So you'll see in the mediocre one, the person said, created a software application used by bankers for small scale securities exchange. So from this, okay, I know you created something. I know the audience. It was used for bankers, but it's pretty vague. Like, what does the application do? How does it help the bankers? What is the impact of that, right? And so then you can see in the good, great, and excellent how you can add more detail to your bullet points to really make, you know, a strong impression on the work about the work that you've done. So you can see they add more specificity. So now it's not a software application anymore. And the excellent, it's a trade management reporting tool. They added the programming languages that they used to develop it, C++ on the back end, .NET on the front end, you know, that explains, you know, so it's like, okay, this person can do front end and back end development. Awesome, right? And then that impact. So it, you know, streamlined a process that helped the company make $500,000 a day. That sounds like someone you want to hire, right? So this is just showing you an example of how, you know, giving more specificity and more impact to the work that you did, even if it's just in a project, not even an internship, right? But just showing the impact, you know, or, you know, Another example someone brought up last night. So what if they built an app, but it's not in the iOS store? You could even say instead, okay, this app that I built for people who want to keep track of all the different coffees they've ever drank, would have an estimated, maybe you could try to estimate the number of users that it would have, right? So there are still ways that you can like quantify things. You can give estimates of the impacts that they would have, et cetera. So this is a good resource to use if you're struggling to figure out how to describe your work. I hope it's helpful. I'm gonna check for questions. Are we going to have a resume review? So I don't want to promise anything, but I am going to try to set aside 4 hours next week as office hours, and people that would like me to review their resume, I will review them at that time, but it is kind of dependent on my schedule. So I'm going to try to make that happen because students yesterday were also requesting some time for a resume review. So I will get back to you all on that. Okay, how are we doing on time? Okay. So I'm gonna skip this slide because we only have about 20-ish minutes left, and I do wanna leave time at the end for questions. But if you go through the slide deck on your own, I included some more examples of resume mistakes. So just things that like poor formatting, it makes your resume look messy and unprofessional. Having too much information. Sometimes people don't know how to take things out, or they're submitting their master resume and it's too crowded, it's too much info. Mixing technical and non-technical work experiences. So what I mean by that is that I think it's really smart to have a section that is technical, and then if you for some reason do want to include non-technical work that you've done, have it in a different section that you could call other work experience, just so it makes it easier for the person reviewing your resume to really hone in on the technical stuff, which in this context, that's what they care about. And then finally, listing student groups without leadership experience. So here, I think sometimes, well, this really more so applies if you're a freshman or a sophomore. So, when you're just starting out in college, you may not have a ton of like leadership experience. And so it might just say, I'm a member of these 4 clubs, which is cool, right? But being a member can really vary. Being a member could just mean that you're on their listserv and you get their weekly emails about events, right? Whereas being a member can be all the way to like, you help plan events, you help raise money, et cetera, right? So I would say if you are in a situation where you do a lot of stuff on campus, but none of it in a particular like leadership capacity, still try to talk about the impact that you have on the group, because just saying you're a member is too vague and it doesn't really demonstrate any sort of activity. So that was what I want you to take from that one. So please take a look at this later on. I just want to make sure we get through all the material, so that's why I'm not going to go through each point in depth right now. The question we had, would TAing for a math computer science course count as technical or non-technical? It would be technical experience. Okay, and then also I'm going to skip this slide as well, but this was just a before and after that I wanted you guys to look at so you could see how a student, took their resume from being just okay to being really strong and helping them really stand out as an intern candidate. Okay, so I'm going to touch briefly on LinkedIn and GitHub because I don't think it is super relevant to the virtual career fair, but it is relevant to just internship and job searching in general. So typically, let's say, you submit your resume for a job and, the company takes a look at it, they like it. They're gonna probably, the next step is do some more digging to learn more about you. And the 2 places that they will most likely go is your LinkedIn page and your GitHub profile. So on LinkedIn, they're trying to see if there is additional information that can give a fuller picture of your professional and academic experiences. So since a resume is typically 1 page, right, you have to target, you have to edit, right? But on your LinkedIn, you can have everything. You can kind of see LinkedIn as a digital version of your master resume. So oftentimes recruiters will check out your LinkedIn before calling you or reaching out to you for an interview because they just want to get more background on you. And then as far as your GitHub, especially if a engineering manager or just an engineer, is looking at your GitHub, they're really, wanting to see the projects that you've done. And so you want to make sure that your GitHub profile is well organized. And you can do that by having a README file for each of the projects you've done, which explains, what the project was for, what it does, what your part in it was, etc. And then in this slide, I have a link to a guide on how to write README files. And I think it's really, really helpful because, a recruiter or engineering manager could be blown away by the project that you did, after looking at it and want to call you or email you right away. And so it can be a lost opportunity if someone goes to your GitHub and it's just like a mess and it's all these like half-finished projects, et cetera, et cetera. So it is worth your time to organize your GitHub just for your general internship and job search in the tech industry. Okay, I'm gonna pause. Are there any other questions about resumes? Before I move on to talking about elevator pitches, which is how you can professionally summarize yourself to companies. Okay, so that's a good question. If you don't have much on your GitHub, okay, so I would say if there's at least one project you have that is mostly finished, semi-finished, that you can maybe, clean up the code a little bit and write a README file that talks about at least what you were trying to accomplish with that project, and then having that one be public and setting your other projects to private so that people, when they look at your GitHub profile, only see a messy GitHub portfolio. Okay, if you have more questions, oh, here we go. So yeah, if you have things in a private repo, so that's a good point. So are you saying it's probably a repo that is owned by someone else and so you can't have it linked to your GitHub? That's a tricky situation. I mean, if it's not violating like their rules or their privacy around their repo, you might be able to copy over the project to your own repo, or at least copy the parts of the code base that you worked on and have that in your own public repo so that you can share that. Okay. If you have a really good internship experience, can you mute your microphone, please? If you have a really good internship experience, but the code you wrote isn't available for public view, would the experience trump the Git? Wait, if you have a good internship experience. Well, yeah, so if you have on your resume about the internship experience and the work that you've done, but you can't post it in GitHub because that code base belongs to a company, that's fine. Yeah, no one expects you to, post projects that you have no ownership in, right? So that's okay. Don't worry too much about that. All right, so elevator pitches. So what is an elevator pitch? It is a 30 to 90-second introduction where you can give some background on, your interests, your career goals, why you're interested in that company, why you want that specific job or internship at that company. So it's basically a professional summary of yourself. It's a good way to introduce yourself to a company because immediately after giving your elevator pitch, now the recruiter or the hiring manager knows what you're interested in, what programming languages what are your career interests, why you're excited about that company. So already the wheels are turning about, okay, where could this student go? What type of role could I place them in? What opportunities will be good for them within my company, right? And so it's really good to, maybe write down a version of this and then practice it a couple times, because typically a lot of people, when they're in an interview or career fair setting, they're kind of nervous, right? And when you're nervous, you don't always give the best introduction of yourself, right? And so just having an elevator pitch pre-written and then practice a couple of times, it, you know, gives you something where you already know what you want to say. And so you don't have to try to think of what you want to say off the top of your head. So it should also help you feel more prepared when you're talking to each of these companies. So I'm going to play a recording. This is a elevator pitch that one of our gurus from our CodePath iOS course wrote. Rajiv was a computer science student at Arizona State, and now he's working for Google. So he definitely knows what he's talking about when it comes to career and job searches. So I'm going to play this so just you can hear what an elevator pitch sounds like.
Hey there, my name is Rajiv. I'm a math and computer science major who's graduating soon. I'm looking for full-time roles. Specifically, I have a lot of experience doing program management. So I really like developing software, but I also really like to help others and lead teams to develop things. So I would be interested in learning more about what sort of program management or project management roles you have. And what kind of skills you're looking for, and then I can sort of give you some background on myself as well.
Awesome. So I really love a couple of things. So first he starts off, my name, what am I doing currently? I'm a senior at Arizona State that's about to graduate. Then he starts to talk about what his technical interests are. So he really enjoys leadership and program management in a different to software development. And so he talks about his interests for a little bit, and then he segues that into the types of roles that he's looking for. He's really interested in finding a technical program manager role, right? So that's and so that was only 30 seconds. And already from that, if I were a recruiter, I would have like 10 questions I would be ready to ask him to get to know him more, to learn about his experience and where I could possibly have him working in my company. And then there's also a 60-second version here that you can listen to after this or in your free time when you're making your own elevator pitch to prepare for the career fair. Okay, I see a question about the link. So yes, in the slide deck, which is in the Slack channel, and I will share it again after this call, you can click on any of these links that I've clicked on to review this material yourself. Okay, so I already briefly touched on this by listening to Rajiv's elevator pitch, but just so that it's very clear, here are the elements of a pitch. So here's how you should structure it. Here's how you should structure it, excuse me. So first you introduce yourself and your skills. Then you can talk about, this is actually something Rajiv didn't do that I would try to fit in. So that one that he shared was only 30 seconds. I would make mine even maybe 15 seconds longer so I could quickly throw out some things that I've accomplished. Like if I built an iOS app, if I had a killer internship this past summer, you know, if I was an award-winning TA for a course at my university, you know, whatever, you know, throw in an accomplishment or two. So that's like, not only are you talking about your skills and your career interests, but you're already showing that even at 19 or 20 or 21, you've accomplished a lot. Right? So your skills, your accomplishments, your motivation. So for this, I would either say, if you have more experience, you could talk about the ways that you add value. Maybe you're interviewing for a startup that is working on augmented reality and you took a class on AR, or maybe you're a master's student and so you've studied AR in depth, right? So you can talk specifically about your experience and the way that that would add value to a company. Or if you're earlier in your career, you can instead talk about the reason that you are interested in that company and what you could learn, the experience, the knowledge that you could gain from working at that company. You know, and either way is very effective. You know, if you can talk about the way that you would make the company better, that's great. But also, companies really like to hear about why you're excited to work for them. That, you know, immediately makes them feel like you're going to be a person that will stick around for a long time because you care about the work they do or the product they're offering, et cetera. So, you know, even if you can only talk about why you're interested in working there, that's still going to make a really strong positive impression. And then finally, you should always end with what should happen next. So in Rajiv's elevator pitch, he said, you know, I'm looking for technical program roles. So next, I would love to hear about what opportunities that you have at your organization that aligns with my interests, and we can continue the conversation from there, right? That's a great way to segue, to hand off to the recruiter or the engineering manager or the hiring manager, whoever you're talking to, right? That, you know, says, okay, what do I want to happen next? Thankfully, in a career fair setting, it's pretty obvious why you're there. You're there because you want an internship or a job. So you don't have to maybe state your goal too explicitly, but it is still good. It's a part of the elevator pitch to, you know, be able to express what you want to get out of that conversation with the recruiter. Cool. How are we doing on time? Okay, good. We had 10 minutes left. Awesome. Questions about elevator pitches. Hopefully this is, you know, not completely new information. It's maybe just a more structured way of thinking about how to talk about yourself, you know, but I'm sure if any of you have done an interview before, the first thing they ask you is to tell me about yourself, right? And so hopefully this is not new information, but just more structured information. Okay, no questions? All right. If you have them, please feel free to add them in at any time. All right. Yeah, okay, I did get one question about GitHub. Yeah, if your GitHub is empty, like there's nothing there, then yeah, I would just say leave it off your resume, because, you know, why are you sharing an empty repository, right? So yeah, you could just leave it off. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about was figuring out how you can understand employers' values. So, you know, when the list of companies comes out, you're going to be asked to rank your choices. And so you know, there will probably be some companies that you're like, oh, wow, like massive company, number one, right? But you have to consider probably everyone. For example, if there's Facebook, right? For example, probably everyone's going to be like Facebook number one, right? So you still need to think about the other companies and how what your preferences are around those companies. So it's important to figure out what they value, what they care about, maybe the company culture, and if that's something that you are interested in or think you would like, right? So just some general tips. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of you, we all grew up with the internet. We all know how to do a Google search. So hopefully this isn't, too much of new information. So you can go to the company's website. Typically they will have a career page or a company blog, where you can read from other engineers or other employees what it's like to work there, what types of projects they work on, what they really like about the company culture, why do they go to work every day? And that can, and if you're reading one of those and you feel really excited about what they're talking about, then that's a good indication that that might be a place that you'd like to work at, right? So, but when you're doing this, that means you have to already know what values or goals, that you have for an internship or a job. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples in the next slides so that you can get a sense of what I'm talking about when you're trying to determine a company's values. Okay, so the Khan Academy. So this is an organization that offers education programs to children, right? So if you are a person that cares a lot about teaching, if you've ever been a tech fellow for CodePath, you probably really enjoy teaching, helping other people learn, right? So then you might be someone who's really motivated about education. So this, so if you're reading through a company like the Khan Academy and you see all the passion they have for education, for preparing the next generation of software engineers, and that excites you, that's a good indication that that might be a company you would like to work for, right? And then from the things that you learn by reading their website, you can put together maybe a couple of questions about, how you could impact the company or, what you could learn from the company that would continue you on your career path of mixing education and tech. And this is a completely hypothetical example, right? But I'm just trying to show you like how you can learn information about the company and then use that to figure out if it aligns with your own career goals. Okay, so another example is the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. So they care a lot about justice and equality, right? So if you're a person that cares about social justice issues, current political events, and you know, want to work in tech to help make the world a better place in those arenas, the Chan Zuckerberg Institute, you know, might be a company that really excites you, right? So it's really just about thinking about not just, you know, well, I know Java, so I should look for a job where they need someone that knows Java, right? You can take it to the next level and think about, you know, what do I want to do with those skills? You know, how do I want my skills to impact the world or a company, et cetera? Okay, so I'm not going to belabor that point too much. I have a couple of other examples in here with Google and Oracle. And so the final thing I'll say about that is, you know, talk to other people. So you probably don't need to for this career fair, but just in general, if you ever find a company or an opportunity that you're really excited about, one of the best ways to learn about that organization is to talk to someone who currently works there. And I think you would be surprised about how excited engineers are to talk to current computer science and STEM students. You know, I've never encountered an engineer that when I said, hey, I have this student who really would like to learn more about what you do in fintech, has he or she ever been like, oh, I don't have time for students, right? So definitely take advantage of the fact that you're currently in this state where everyone cares about you and wants you to have a great career, right? And feel free to reach out to people. If you find people on LinkedIn or GitHub or Reddit or wherever you look for people, right? And you see that they work for a company that you would love to work for, don't feel shy or embarrassed about reaching out to them and asking about, you know, why they like to work there and what they get out of that experience, and, you know, maybe if it would be a good fit for you. It really is, you know, probably the best way to learn about a company. All right. So, I'm proud of myself because yesterday we ran over about 15 minutes and I felt really bad. So I had to cram everything into an hour. Thank you guys so much for participating. I'm going to leave these last 5 minutes open for questions about anything I've discussed over the past hour. Okay. How do you make sure your work for an internship shows if you're restricted by the company's copyright to talk about the code project too much? Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So I would definitely, before you finish that internship, ask your manager about how much you can disclose. And I'm sure that they will probably have some good advice on what you can and can't disclose. So obviously you can still put that you worked for that company over the summer, and then you could probably also talk about what programming languages you used, right? Or, you know, programming languages, databases, etc. But then for that next piece of how much you can talk about your impact on the business, I would definitely talk to your manager. And if this is a past internship, just email him or her, you know, or Slack them or LinkedIn them, just to say, hey, I really want to put the work that I did from last summer on my resume. What can I say? You know, I think that's probably the best next step for you if you're in that situation where you have a lot of restrictions about what you can say about your internship. Any other questions? I mean, post the question. You don't have to say I have a question. It's okay, guys. Take your time. Okay. Can you put a GHC scholarship on your resume? Absolutely, absolutely. Grace Hopper is such a well-known institution in the tech industry. I think employers will be very impressed if you are a GHC scholar. Definitely add that in your resume. You could put it under an achievements section, or, you know, or you could put it under extracurriculars. Okay. Is it a good idea to ask your manager to review your resume? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely would not hurt, right? Especially someone who, you know, if they're a manager in a technical field, they probably have a lot of experience hiring candidates, helping the human resources department determine which candidates should be hired for different opportunities. Absolutely. If your manager is willing to take a look at your resume and give you some feedback, definitely take up that opportunity. Yes, Swisti, you're exact, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. You are absolutely right. So yes, a lot of times companies, they understand that your first resume experience, your first resume experience, excuse me, your first internship experience, you've never integrated new code into an existing code base. Like there's a lot of stuff you've never done. You've never worked in like a professional software engineering team. So it's really a learning opportunity for you. And that's fine. So that's why I was saying earlier, if you really can't quantify the impact of any of the work that you did, don't stress about it too much. It's a nice to have, not a must have. Yeah, thank you for the question. All right, so it's 1 o'clock. I don't want to waste any more of your precious Saturday. So I'm going to post the slide deck again in the Slack channels, and I'll have it posted in the pilot technical interview prep channel as well. Sorry about that. And then, yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to Slack me or email me. And thank you all so much for your participation.